The hallway inside the old art center was incredibly long. It was painted a bright, sterile white that seemed to go on forever. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, a young girl walked down this stretch of linoleum floor. Her name was Lisa, though to most people there, she was just the quiet girl with the tight brown bun. She was 12 years old, thin as a twig, and her eyes always focused on the rectangle of light at the very end of the corridor. That light was the exit, but to her, it was the entrance to the only thing that mattered. She carried her dance bag over her shoulder. The strap of the bag was old and fraying, and it dug into her palm with a familiar ache. Inside the bag were her shoes, worn down at the toes, and a bottle of lukewarm water. This bag was her whole world. It held everything she needed to prove she belonged here, even though she felt like a stranger in her own life. When she reached the main studio, she paused. The door was a simple metal slab with a small glass window. She didn't push it open right away. She took a deep breath. The air inside the room smelled distinct. It was a mix of rosin, old sweat, and the lemon cleaner the janitors used in the mornings. For Lisa, that smell was better than fresh bread or flowers. It smelled like hard work. The instructor, Madame K, was already there. She was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of stone. She stood near the mirrored wall, wearing a long black cardigan over her leotard. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it pulled at the skin of her forehead. She didn't smile when Lisa walked in. She just checked the silver watch on her wrist and pointed to the bar. "Class has started," Madame K said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It cut through the silence of the room like a knife. "Do not waste my time." Lisa rushed to take her place at the bar. There were 10 other girls in the room. They were all stretching, their limbs long and loose. Lisa felt a pang of jealousy in her stomach. They looked so natural, so relaxed. Lisa felt like a coiled spring, always ready to snap. She knew she wasn't the most talented girl in the room. She didn't have the perfect arches or the long neck that Madame K loved so much. What she had was sheer stubbornness. The music started a tinkling piano melody that they had heard 100 times. They went through the basics. Please. Tenders. Dégagés. Lisa moved with intense focus. She tried to copy the exact angle of the girl's foot next to her. She gritted her teeth and pushed her muscles until they burned. She wanted to be perfect. She needed to be perfect. She needed to be perfect. After 45 minutes of bare work, Madame Cap clapped her hands. "Center floor," she commanded. "Today we work on the turns, the fouettés." The class groaned internally. Fouettés were hard. They required balance, speed, and strength. You had to spin on one leg while using the other leg to whip your body around. It was a move that separated the serious dancers from the hobbyists. Lisa watched as the first girl went. She spun 3 times and wobbled on the landing. Madame K sighed, a sound that seemed to deflate the whole room. "No, no, no. Your leg is too low. You are skating, not dancing." One by one the girls tried. One fell. One gave up after 2 turns. Then it was Lisa's turn. She stepped into the center. She felt the eyes of everyone on her back. She felt the cold air conditioning blowing against her damp skin. She planted her left foot. She raised her right arm. She took a breath and whipped her leg around. Once, twice, 3 times. She spun faster than she ever had before. The room became a blur of color and light. She didn't feel dizzy. She felt focused. For those few seconds, she wasn't the shy girl who struggled in school. She wasn't the daughter of parents who didn't understand her art. She was just energy and motion. She pushed for a 4th turn, then a 5th. She stopped suddenly, her heels snapping into the floor with a loud thud. She held the pose, her chest heaving, her arms extended gracefully. For a second there was silence. Lisa looked at herself in the huge mirror that ran along the wall. She looked small against the backdrop of the empty studio, but for a moment she felt tall. She waited for the nod. She waited for the rare good job that Madame K gave out once a year. Madame K didn't nod. She walked slowly across the floor. Her footsteps were the only sound in the room. She stopped right in front of Lisa, close enough that Lisa could see the small lines around the woman's eyes. The instructor looked down at Lisa's feet, then slowly up to her face. "You have the mechanics," Madame K said. Her tone was flat, almost bored. Lisa felt her heart hammer against her ribs. "Your timing is adequate. Your rotation is acceptable, Madam K continued. She turned her back and walked toward the window, looking out at the street below. But mechanics do not make an artist. She turned back around, her eyes cold. You dance like you are solving a math problem, Lisa. You are too stiff. You think too much. You are in your head, not in your heart. Lisa felt her face get hot. She bit the inside of her cheek. Madam K gestured vaguely to the other girls, who were standing near the wall, wiping sweat from their foreheads. Look at them. Some of them are messy, some of them are slow, but they feel something when they move. With dedication, they might become dancers. They have the potential to be artists. Madam K took a step closer to Lisa. But you are just a machine. A machine can be trained, yes, but a machine cannot make art. She shook her head slightly. You'll never make it. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. You'll never make it. Lisa didn't cry. She wanted to. She felt a sharp prick behind her eyes, and a lump formed in her throat that made it hard to swallow. But she refused to let the tears fall in front of everyone. She just stood there, frozen in her fifth position, while Madam clapped her hands again. Next, the instructor shouted, we are wasting time. Lisa walked back to the spot along the wall. Her legs felt like lead weights. She leaned against the cool plaster and watched the other girls take their turns. The girl next to her, a tall blonde named Jess, gave her a sympathetic look. Lisa ignored her. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted to be good. When the class was finally over, the girls rushed to their bags, chatting and laughing about dinner plans and homework. Lisa moved slowly. She untied the ribbons on her shoes with shaking fingers. She packed her bag, sliding the worn shoes into their mesh pocket. She walked out of the studio and into the long, white hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a constant, annoying hum. The building was empty now. The sounds of the city outside were muffled by the thick windows. Lisa walked toward the exit at the far end of the hall. With every step, Madam K's words echoed in her head. You're just a machine. You'll never make it. It felt like the truth. Madam K was the expert. She had danced in big companies all over the world. If she said Lisa didn't have it, then Lisa didn't have it. Lisa looked at her reflection in the darkened glass of the exit door. She saw a girl with a pale face and eyes that looked too old for 12 years. She pushed the metal bar on the door and stepped outside. The evening air was cool. It smelled like car exhaust and frying food from the diner down the street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Lisa adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. It was heavy. Her feet hurt. Her heart hurt in a way she didn't have a name for yet. She started the long walk to the bus stop. She didn't quit right then. A part of her, the stubborn part that had spun 5 times in a row, refused to let those words be the end of the story. But as she walked away from the studio, the anger began to burn deep inside her stomach. It wasn't a hot, fast anger. It was a cold, hard resolve. She decided, right there on the cracked pavement, that she would show Madam K butt, that she would show Madam K Bauman. She didn't know how she would do it. She didn't know she had the soul the instructor wanted, but she knew she had the ability to work harder than anyone else. She would become so perfect, so technically flawless, that they would have to look at her. She would make the machine into something they couldn't ignore. She looked back at the Arts Center building one last time. The windows glowed yellow in the twilight. Just watch me, she whispered to the empty street. Then she turned her back and kept walking. By the time she turned 18, Lisa was no longer dancing in the small, stuffy studio with the chipped paint. She had made it out. She had fought her way into a prestigious academy in the heart of the city, a place where the windows were huge and went all the way from the floor to the ceiling. The floors here weren't old linoleum. They were professional, sprung wood that felt like walking on a cloud. This place was different. It felt professional. It felt like the big time. Lisa lived in a tiny apartment 3 blocks away, a walk she did every morning in the dark. The apartment was expensive and drafty, and the radiator made a banging sound at night that kept her awake, but she didn't care. She was living her dream. Life here had a very specific rhythm. Her alarm would go off at 4:30 a.m. She would roll out of bed, 4:30 a.m. She would roll out of bed, her muscles stiff and sore from the day before, and eat a bowl of plain oatmeal. Then she would put on her coat and walk to the coffee shop where she worked. For 5 hours, she stood behind the counter, steaming milk and brewing espresso for people who were rushing to their office jobs. She watched them laugh, talk on their phones, and complain about the traffic. They looked at her like she was just a girl in a green apron. They had no idea that in a few hours she would be in the studio working herself to the point of collapse. At 10:30 a.m., her shift ended. She would run back to her apartment, change into her dance clothes, and run to the academy. She would usually arrive just in time, her hair wet from a quick shower, and pinned back tightly before she even stepped into the building. The training here was brutal. Madam K was gone, replaced by a rotating roster of guest teachers and retired dancers. They were all different, but they were all looking for the same thing: perfection. They wanted legs that went higher, arms that were softer, and jumps that defied gravity. Lisa threw herself into the work with a scary kind of focus. She remembered what Madam K had told her all those years ago: "You are a machine. You'll never make it." Those words were still there, burning in the back of her mind every time she looked in the mirror. She wasn't dancing to express herself anymore. She wasn't dancing because it made her happy. She was dancing to prove the old woman wrong. She treated her body like a science project. She knew exactly how many calories were in an apple and how many she burned during a jumping lesson. When the other girls went out for pizza after a long week, Lisa would stay in her apartment and eat a salad. When they complained about being tired, she would do extra stretches in the corner while they rested. Her feet were a mess. They were covered in calluses, blisters, and bruises that never really had time to heal. She would tape them up every morning, wrapping her toes like little mummies until they looked stiff and unnatural. The pain was just a normal part of the day now. It was like a background noise that she learned to ignore. The problem was that Lisa was becoming lonely. She didn't really notice it at first because she was so busy, but slowly her world started to shrink. It used to include her family, her high school friends, and her hobbies. Now, it only included the studio and her job. One Sunday, her mother came to visit. They met at a small cafe near the academy. Her mother looked at Lisa with worried eyes. "You look so thin, honey," she said, reaching out to touch Lisa's arm. Lisa pulled her arm away gently. She didn't like being touched. It felt like someone might break her concentration. "I'm fine, Mom. This is how dance are supposed to look." "But you look tired," her mother insisted. "And you never call anymore. I just want to make sure you're happy." "Is this still making you happy?" Lisa stared at her coffee cup. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell her mother that happy didn't matter. Winning mattered. Being the best mattered. She was sacrificing everything so she could stand on that stage and show everyone that she was good enough. "It's not about being happy," Lisa said, her voice cold and flat. "It's about being great. You wouldn't understand." Her mother looked hurt, and she eventually left. But Lisa didn't chase after her. She just finished her coffee and went back to the studio to stretch. She told herself she didn't have time for feelings. Feelings were messy. Feelings made you weak. As long as her technique was flawless, nothing else mattered. The months went by, and Lisa started to get noticed. The teachers would use her as an example. "Look at the line on Lisa," they would say to the class. "Look at her extension. She never misses a beat." She was technically flawless. Her turns were consistent. Her jumps were high. But there was a cost that she didn't see coming. She was dancing like a robot. Every movement was calculated to the millimeter. It was beautiful, but it was empty. She had burned out the part of herself that could feel joy or sadness because those emotions were messy. One afternoon, a famous dancer came to teach a master class. This man was a legend. He had performed on every stage in the world. He watched the class do a difficult routine across the floor. Lisa went last. She hit every mark perfectly. Her pointed toes sliced through the air like a knife. She landed in the final pose without a single wobble. She stood there, breathing hard, waiting for the praise. She just knew she had nailed it. The man walked over to her. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. He just tilted his head to the side and looked at her with a mixture of confusion and pity. "Incredible control," he said. "Technically, you are one of the best students I have seen in a long time." Lisa felt a rush of pride. She had done it. "However," he continued, turning away to address the room, "it is boring. It is empty." The room went quiet. Lisa felt like she had been slapped. "You are moving like a photograph," the man told her. "You are pretty to look at, but there is no life inside you." Where is the fire? Where is the pain? Where is the love? You are hiding behind your perfection." He walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the floor. The other girls wouldn't look at her. They looked at their feet or the ceiling. Lisa stood frozen. The humiliation was hot and sharp. She realized then that Madame K had been right about one thing. Lisa had built a wall around herself. She had turned herself into a machine because she thought that was what was needed to succeed. But in doing so, she had lost the very thing that makes art special. She had lost her humanity. That night, Lisa went back to her tiny, drafty apartment. She took off her shoes and looked at her feet. They were bruised and ugly. She looked at herself in the dusty mirror on the closet door. She looked gaunt. Her eyes were hollow. She looked exactly like what she was, a girl who had starved herself of everything: food, fun, love, and rest, all to chase a ghost. She sat down on the edge of her bed and put her face in her hands. For the first time in 6 years, she let herself cry. She cried for the little girl who just loved to spin. She cried for the little girl who just loved to spin. She cried because she was the best dancer in the room, but she felt completely empty inside. She knew she couldn't stop. The audition for the national company was only a few months away. She had come too far to quit now. But as she lay in bed listening to the radiator bang, she felt a heavy dread settle in her stomach. She was pushing her body to the limit, and she knew something had to give. She just hoped it wasn't her. The day of the audition arrived with a sky so blue it looked fake. It was the kind of morning that makes people feel hopeful, but for Lisa it felt like the sky was pressing down on her chest. Today was the most important day of her life. It was the audition for the national company. This was it. The finish line. The moment where she would finally prove that all the pain, the loneliness, and the starvation were worth it. The audition was being held in a massive theater downtown. Lisa stood outside the glass doors of the building, clutching her dance bag. She was wearing a black leotard and pink tights, the uniform of serious dancers. Around her, dozens of other girls were stretching on the sidewalk. They looked like a flock of exotic birds, long necks, high buns, legs that went on for days. Lisa looked at them and felt that familiar spike of jealousy. They were laughing. They were chatting nervously about the choreographer and the music. They looked alive. Lisa felt dead inside. She hadn't eaten anything but a few crackers since the day before. She was running on caffeine and pure panic. She knew she looked gaunt. She could see the hollows in her own cheeks when she looked in a mirror. She had lost another 5 pounds in the last month because she was terrified of being too big for the judges. "You ready?" a girl next to her asked. She had bright red hair and a warm smile. Lisa just nodded. She couldn't speak. If she opened her mouth, she thought she might throw up. She turned away from the girl and looked at her phone. No new messages. Her mother hadn't called in weeks, not since that day at the cafe. The silence from her family was loud, but Lisa tried to convince herself it didn't matter. She had to focus. They were called into the theater. The room was huge, much bigger than the Academy Studios. The floor was a marly surface laid over wood, and it squeaked under their shoes. At the front of the room, sitting behind a long table, were 3 judges. One was the famous dancer who had called her boring a few months ago. Seeing him made Lisa's stomach turn. She was terrified of him, but she also wanted to show him that she could be different. She could be what he wanted. A pianist sat in the corner. "Number 304, the woman at the desk called out. That was Lisa. She walked to the center of the floor. The lights were bright in her eyes. She couldn't see the judges clearly, only their dark silhouettes. She took her starting position. She raised her arms. She tried to feel something: anger, joy, sadness. But she felt nothing. Anger, joy, sadness. But she felt nothing but a hollow buzzing in her ears. The music started. It was a fast, frantic piano piece that sounded like a storm. Lisa began to dance. She moved with the precision she was known for. Her technique was flawless. Every toe point was perfect. Every turn was tight and fast. She jumped high, her legs splitting in the air. She was executing the routine perfectly. It was a display of physical power that she had worked years to build. Then came the hardest part of the dance. The choreographer had put in a series of rapid jumps, moving down the floor, followed by a turn into a deep lunge, and then a final quick spin to stop. It required a lot of force and a sudden stop. Lisa launched herself into the jumps. 1, 2, 3, 4. She felt light. She felt like she was flying. She pushed off the floor for the 5th jump, aiming for maximum height. She knew the judges were watching her elevation. She came down from the jump. Her right foot landed on the floor, but instead of absorbing the impact like a spring, it just stopped. There was no crack. There was no snap that anyone could hear. It was a silent disaster. It felt like stepping on a light bulb, or like a rubber band inside her ankle suddenly giving way. Her foot rolled sideways, collapsing under her weight. Lisa hit the floor hard. She didn't finish the turn. She didn't hold the pose. She crumpled into a heap on the marley floor, sliding a few feet because of the momentum. The music didn't stop right away. The pianist played 2 more bars before realizing something was wrong and cutting the music abruptly. The silence that followed was the worst sound Lisa had ever heard. It wasn't the quiet of a library or a church. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a room full of people holding their breath. The other dancers stopped stretching. The judges stopped writing. Lisa was lying on her side, gasping for air. The pain hadn't hit her yet. There was just a sickening feeling of nausea and a strange numbness in her ankle. She tried to move her foot, but it wouldn't listen. It felt like it was attached to her leg, but belonged to someone else. The famous judge stood up and walked onto the floor. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. He knelt down beside her. "Don't move," he said gently. Lisa looked up at him. His face was blurry. "I can finish," she whispered. Her voice was shaking. "I can do it again." "No," he said softly. "You can't." The pain suddenly arrived. It was a hot, burning wave that shot up her leg and made her cry out. It felt like her bone was trying to poke through her skin. She grabbed her ankle and squeezed her eyes shut. Someone brought a bag of ice. The woman at the desk was on the phone calling an ambulance. The other girls were watching, some with hands over their mouths. Lisa could feel their eyes on her. She felt exposed. She felt like a failure. She had worked for 6 years to be perfect for one moment, and in 1 second it was over. The paramedics arrived a few minutes later. They were efficient and kind, but to Lisa they felt like invaders. They lifted her onto a stretcher. She refused to look at the judges. She refused to look at the other dancers. She stared up at the high ceiling of the theater, counting the lights to keep from crying. As they wheeled her out through the wide glass doors, the cool air hit her face. The sirens of the ambulance started to wail. It was a lonely sound. In the back of the ambulance, a young paramedic checked her vitals. He put an oxygen mask over her face to help with the shock. Then he looked at her foot, which was already swelling up, turning angry shades of purple and blue. "That was quite a jump you were trying," he said, trying to make small talk to distract her. He nodded slowly. He looked at the X-ray machine they had portable access to, or perhaps he was just looking at the way her bone was pressing against the skin. "You've been dancing a long time," he said. It wasn't a question. He could tell by the shape of her legs, by the scars and calluses on her toes, even through the tights. "I've been dancing since I was 6, Lisa whispered from behind the mask. The paramedic shook his head slightly as he looked at the images on his small monitor. "It's a stress fracture," he said, "and it's an old one that finally gave way. But looking at this, you have microfractures all over this joint. It's not just today. It's years of pounding on it." Lisa closed her eyes. She knew he was right. "You pushed it too hard," he said gently. He secured a brace around her ankle to keep it still. "Sometimes the body just says enough." Lisa lay back against the stiff pillow. The siren wailed louder as they turned a corner. She thought about the empty apartment she would go back to. She thought about the years of skipping meals, the lonely nights, the girl with the red hair who tried to smile at her. She had given everything to this dream. She had sold her health, her happiness, and her family for the chance to dance on that stage. Now she was going to the hospital, and she didn't know if she would ever walk normally again, let alone dance. Tears finally leaked out of the corners of her eyes, sliding down into her ears. She felt cold. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her with nothing but the pain and the terrible, heavy silence of the ambulance rushing through the city. She had wanted to show everyone she was a machine. Well, she got her wish. Machines break when you push them too far. The surgery was successful, at least according to the doctors. They repaired the ligaments and fixed the bone, but the recovery felt less like a healing process and more like a prison sentence. Lisa was confined to her mother's living room, her right leg encased in a hard white plaster that reached all the way up to her knee. For the first 2 weeks, Lisa didn't speak much. She sat on the couch under a knitted blanket, staring at the television without really seeing it. She felt like a ghost. The girl who had danced until her feet bled was gone, replaced by this broken thing that couldn't even walk to the bathroom without help. The silence in the house was heavy. It wasn't the peaceful silence of an empty studio. It was the thick, awkward silence of things left unsaid. Her mother moved around the house quietly, trying not to disturb her, but her presence was loud to Lisa. Every time her mother entered the room, Lisa felt a spike of guilt. She saw the tiredness in her mother's eyes, the way her shoulders slumped as if she was carrying a heavy load. Lisa felt trapped. Her entire identity had been wrapped up in being a dancer. It was the only thing she thought she was good at. Without it, she was just a 19-year-old girl with a high school diploma she barely earned, no job, no money, and a shattered ankle. The future she had fought so hard for had vanished in a single second on that stage. The anger she felt was suffocating. She was angry at the judges, at her body, and mostly at herself for thinking she was invincible. One rainy afternoon, the frustration boiled over. Lisa tried to reach a glass of water on the coffee table, but she knocked it over. The water spilled onto the rug. Lisa let out a scream of pure rage. She grabbed a pillow and threw it across the room. She thrashed against the blankets, tears streaming down her face, screaming at the plaster cast that covered her leg. Her mother rushed into the room, her face pale with alarm. "Lisa, what is it? What's wrong?" "I hate this," Lisa yelled, her voice cracking. "I hate this," Lisa yelled, her voice cracking. "I hate my leg. I hate this room. I hate that I can't do anything." Her mother didn't flinch. She walked over, picked up the pillow, and sat down on the edge of the couch. She didn't tell Lisa to calm down. She didn't tell her to stop crying. She just sat there, a steady anchor in the middle of a storm. Lisa buried her face in her hands, her chest heaving with sobs. "It's gone," she choked out. "Everything is gone. I'm nothing." Her mother reached out and gently stroked Lisa's hair, a gesture she hadn't done in years. "You're not nothing, honey," she said softly. "I worked so hard," Lisa cried. "I gave up everything. I gave up everything. I gave up being your daughter. I gave up having a life. And for what? To be a failure?" The room went quiet except for the sound of Lisa's sobbing. Her mother took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly. "You think I missed seeing you dance because I wanted you to be famous. I didn't care about the trophies, Lisa. I just wanted to see you smile." Lisa looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "You were so unhappy for so long," her mother continued, wiping a tear from Lisa's cheek with her thumb. "You were starving yourself. You were exhausted. You were lonely. I stopped calling because it hurt too much to see you destroying yourself. You're still here. You're alive. That is the only thing that matters to me." She reached for a glass of water on the side table she had brought in earlier and held it out. "You like vanilla ice cream. You have a laugh that used to make the whole house light up. You're smart and kind when you let yourself be. When are you going to pay attention to the rest of yourself? When are you going to be kind to Lisa?" Lisa looked at the glass of water. It was simple and clear. For years, she had punished her body, treating it like a machine that had failed her. She had starved it, beaten it, and ignored it until it finally broke. She realized she didn't even know who she was without the pain of the dance. She took the glass. Her hand shook a little. The water was cool against her lips. It was a small sensation, real and immediate. It wasn't the adrenaline of performing or the burning of her muscles. It was just water. "I don't know how," Lisa whispered. "I don't know how to just be." "It's okay," her mother said, patting her leg gently above the cast. "We have time. You don't have to be perfect today. You just have to be here." Over the next few weeks, the anger slowly began to drain away, replaced by a quiet sort of sadness, but also a sense of relief. The pressure was gone. There was no rehearsal to rush to. There was no wait to watch. There was just the slow, boring process of healing. Lisa started to notice things she had ignored for years. She noticed the way the sunlight hit the plants in the kitchen window in the morning. She noticed the sound of the neighbor's dog barking. She watched bad movies with her mother and ate real food: pizza, pasta, salad with dressing. She looked at her cast every day. It was ugly and heavy. It represented her failure, but it also represented the truth. She had pushed herself too far. She had listened to the voices that told her she wasn't good enough, the voices that told her she had to be a machine. She had lost herself in the pursuit of a dream that didn't love her back. One evening, Lisa sat on the front porch with her mother. The air was getting cooler, signaling the start of autumn. The crickets were chirping in the garden. "Do you think you'll ever dance again?" her mother asked gently. Lisa looked down at her leg. She flexed her toes inside the plaster. She didn't feel the urge to spin or jump. The terror of the stage was gone, too. "I don't know," Lisa said honestly. "Maybe not like that. Maybe not for them." She looked up at the sky, watching the first stars appear. She realized that the cost of her talent wasn't just the broken ankle. It was the years she had spent disconnected from the world. It was the relationships she had calcified and ignored. She had treated her body and her family like obstacles to her goal rather than parts of her life. "But I think," Lisa continued, "I want to move differently now, not to prove something, just because it feels good." Her mother smiled and squeezed her hand. Lisa sat back in the chair. She didn't know what the next step was, and for the first time in her life, that was okay. She wasn't rushing toward a finish line. She was just sitting on the porch, breathing. She had lost a dream she thought she wanted. But in the rubble of that ambition, sitting next to her mother in the quiet dark, she felt like she was finally finding herself. 3 years had passed since the day Lisa fell on that stage. The city was different now, or maybe she was just seeing it with new eyes. The morning sun was shining on the pavement, warming the bricks of the old community center. It was a nice building, though it didn't have the fancy glass windows or the perfect floors of the academy she used to attend. This place smelled like floor wax and crayons, and sometimes, if the wind was right, like the pizza place next door. Lisa stood in front of the large mirror in the main studio. She wasn't wearing the tight black clothes she used to live in. She was wearing loose-fitting sweatpants and a comfortable t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back, but not painfully tight. It was just a simple ponytail. She looked at herself in the reflection. She was older now. Her face had softened. She wasn't the stick-thin girl she was at 18. She looked healthy. There was color in her cheeks, and her eyes didn't look as haunted as they used to. She looked down at her right foot. It was healed mostly. She had a small scar on the side of her ankle, a permanent reminder of the crash. The doctor had told her she would always walk with a slight limp and that dancing professionally would be impossible. At first, that news had destroyed her, but now, looking at that scar, she felt a sense of peace. It was a mark of survival. The sound of little running feet echoed in the hallway. The door burst open, and a dozen children, ages 6 to 10, came tumbling into the room. They were loud and messy. They were dropping their bags and tripping over their own shoelaces. None of them stood with the perfect posture Lisa had demanded of herself. They were wiggling, laughing, and chatting. "Okay, everyone, line up," Lisa called out. She clapped her hands, but she was smiling. The children scrambled to get into a rough line. It wasn't straight. It was a bumpy, squiggly line of small humans. Lisa walked to the front of the room. She didn't stand with her back rigid like a steel rod. She stood comfortably, her weight balanced between both feet, even though her right ankle gave a small twinge of protest in the morning dampness. "Today's going to be fun," she told them. "We aren't going to do those boring exercises. We are going to move like animals." A little boy with messy hair jumped up. "Like a tiger?" he roared. "Exactly like a tiger," Lisa said. "Or maybe a monkey. Or a squirrel." She pressed the play button on the small portable speaker she had brought. Music filled the room. It wasn't the serious piano music of her youth. It was a song with a good beat, something that made you want to tap your foot. "All right, let's go," Lisa said. She started to move. She couldn't do the high jumps anymore. She couldn't spin 5 times without getting dizzy. But she could move. She showed them how to lunge low to the ground, stretching their arms out like a tiger stalking prey. The children copied her. They were terrible at it. They were falling over. They were making faces. They were off the beat. The little girl with pigtails was standing in the back, looking shy. She was trying to copy Lisa, but kept stopping. Lisa noticed her. She walked over, her limp barely noticeable as she slowed her pace. "You're doing great," Lisa said softly to the girl. "But don't worry so much about what your arms look like. Just feel the music. How does it make you want to move?" The girl looked up at Lisa with wide eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. "Just try," Lisa said. "Close your eyes for a second." The girl closed her eyes. The music thumped. After a moment, the girl started to sway. It wasn't a dance move. It was just a wiggle, but it was real. Lisa smiled. Perfect. Keep that feeling. Lisa walked back to the center of the room. She watched them. They were so free. They weren't dancing to get into a company. They weren't dancing to please a judge. They were dancing because it felt good to wiggle and jump. She remembered her old self, the girl who would cry if her turn wasn't perfect. She remembered the girl who starved herself and pushed her body until it broke. She realized now that she had been dancing out of fear. She was so afraid of being nobody that she was willing to destroy herself to be somebody. But looking at these kids, she realized that talent wasn't about being the best machine. Talent was a gift. It was a way to express joy. It was something to be shared, not hoarded like a trophy. The song ended, and the children collapsed onto the floor in giggles. "Miss Lisa, you are a real dancer, right?" the little boy with the messy hair asked, sitting up cross-legged. "My mom said you used to dance on big stages." Lisa paused. She looked at her reflection in the mirror again. She saw the woman she was now. "I did," she said. "I danced on big stages. I was very serious about it. Can you show us a spin?" another girl asked. Lisa hesitated. Her ankle throbbed a little at the memory. But then she felt a sudden urge to move. Not to prove anything, but just to move. "I can try," she said. The music started again, a slower song this time. Lisa took a breath. She didn't prepare for a perfect, technical turn. She just let her body lead. She stepped lightly on her good foot and used her bad foot to push. She spun around once. It wasn't the fastest spin in the world. It wasn't the highest. She wobbled just a tiny bit when she landed, and she had to put a hand down to steady herself. But when she stopped, she was smiling. She wasn't holding her breath. She wasn't waiting for a judge to yell at her. She just stood there, breathing, feeling the air in her lungs and the floor under her feet. The children clapped. They didn't clap because it was perfect. They clapped because they liked it. "That was cool," the little boy said. Lisa laughed. It was a real laugh, one that came from her belly. "Thank you," she said. She looked around the room at the smiling faces. She remembered the words Madam K had said to her all those years ago in the hallway. "You'll never make it." Madam K was wrong. Lisa had made it. She hadn't become the star of the national company. She didn't have her picture on posters in the theater lobby. But she was happy. She was whole. She had a life that was filled with real people, with laughter, and with peace. She had learned that moving her body was a way to connect with the world, not a way to run away from it. She had paid a high price to learn that lesson. She had lost her dream to find her life. "Okay, one more time," Lisa shouted over the music. "But this time, let's fly like birds." She spread her arms wide and began to dance with them. She didn't jump high, but she jumped with her heart. She was dancing in the messy, loud, beautiful room. And for the first time in her life, the music wasn't a command. It was a gift.